rid of that. Okay, yeah, so we'll start with sentence fragments, and it's basically, it all works hand in hand because it's basically making sure that you understand how to put together basic sentences. So we'll listen to our audio first.
Every complete sentence contains a subject and a verb, and must express a complete idea or make a complete statement. A group of words missing a subject, verb, or complete idea is a sentence fragment, which is usually incorrect. A sentence fragment cannot stand alone because it is not a complete idea. To correct a sentence fragment, you can combine it with a complete sentence by using a comma or a connecting word. You can also add the missing sentence component, such as a subject or a verb. Complete sentences must begin with a capital letter and end with punctuation, such as a period ends a statement, an exclamation point emphasizes or expresses excitement, or a question mark indicates a question.
So, we talked a little bit about this on Thursday as far as what you need to make a complete sentence. We know that the very, 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 very least, you have to have a subject and a verb, right? We talked about that super simple little sentence like Joe slept, right? What is Joe doing? He's sleeping. That's a complete sentence. It's a complete idea. Probably most of the time you are going to see something that's a little more advanced. At the very least, you're going to have a subject, a verb, and then probably like an object or another part to that predicate other than just the verb to complete an idea, give you more information. And what also is really crucial is the idea that you need punctuation, right? Every sentence starts with a capital letter, and you have to have one of those three forms to end that idea, right? Any type of, doesn't matter what language you're in, most of them have some type of punctuation that lets you know, right? This is the end of that idea. So most commonly, it's going to be a period. You may see question mark if it's asking a question. And sometimes you'll see an exclamation point. In formal writing, you're not going to see that probably ever. And you should never, if you're writing like a cover letter, right? You're trying to, get a job. You're not going to put a bunch of exclamation points throughout that, no matter how excited you are about maybe working for a company or something. Those are really reserved mostly for informal writing or in fiction writing, to really express, like it says, anger or excitement or something like that. But that's, indicating when you have the end of that complete thought. So a couple rules here, right? Here in Paxson, they use the idea of complete idea. Oftentimes that is like an object that's receiving the action, right? The subject is the one undergoing the action, that is the, actually doing the action, and then there's something else receiving it. So the subject, right, as we talked about, identifies who or what the sentence is about. Usually that's at the beginning of the sentence, or if you have more complicated ones, it's always going to be before the verb. Identifies the action performed by the subject, right? We talked about the verb. This comes in all forms. And then a complete idea. So if it's not that super simple Joe slept type of idea, you got to have something else completed, representing that whole thought. So like there are examples here, right? Joe bought a dog. A dog is what Joe bought. That's the object there that's receiving the action. I won the lottery. I being the subject, won the verb. In that case, right, they're showing you the end punctuation differences here. You'd probably be pretty excited about winning the lottery, so you could use an exclamation point there. And then even with questions, right? You have to have a complete idea for even if you're asking a question. Who is your favorite athlete? Who, in this case, is the subject. So typically, if you're asking a question, who, what, when, where, why, that is going to basically take place of the subject, right? That's the how you're going to start that, and then is your verb, and then you use your question mark. So over here on the side, it's mentioning that some imperative sentences such as hurry, very, these are very, very, very limited examples, but they have an implied subject. So it is a complete sentence, right? The subject would be you, and it's basically understood. So it's, even though it's not stated. So you hurry. They're very, it's almost not worth mentioning that one makes a complete sentence, right? You're not going to encounter that very often. Again, most likely it's going to be in fiction writing or in formal writing. And then secondly, it says, a sentence that asks a question often begins with who, what, when, where, why, or how. Questions can also begin with did, so, should, could, or would. But basically, whatever it is, whether it's those who, what, when, where, why, how, or did, do, should, could, would, that's basically replacing your subject or modifying your subject, as we'll find out, like as a helping word. Okay, let's see here. Oh, am I cutting out? I'm sorry. Is it just the audio you're having some issue with? Anybody else having some problems?
Yes, sir. It's just the audio.
Okay. I don't know if it might be something on your end. If you want to try shut it down and come back in, that might help. It could just be a connection issue there. Anybody else? Nobody else having a problem? Okay. Yeah, Levon, if you keep having trouble, just try, maybe close it down, close down the Zoom, and then reopen it, and I'll let you right back into the class. All right. Hopefully it'll clear up for you though. I'll try not to move around too much. Sometimes that causes an issue too. All right. So we'll look at our few practice questions here on forming complete sentences and identifying fragments. Okay. Right. So their test taking tips is when you to help determine whether a sentence is complete, circle or underline the subject, verb, and complete idea. Also, remember that the sentence must end with a period and or an exclamation point or a question mark. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some other types of punctuation. Like it mentioned here, with the comma, we use those to separate sentences into meaningful units. And sometimes that will separate like a dependent clause to an independent clause, or it will connect two complete ideas to make a complex sentence with a word like and, right, where you have a conjunction. It's just something that we tend to do when we're learning in the earlier stages of learning language is to basically what they're saying there is diagramming the sentence, right? Either find a way, it doesn't have to necessarily be circling or underlining, but if you're having trouble as far as, looking at a sentence, if you can sort of break it down into those ideas and physically just, put an S above the subject, put a V above the verb, or whatever you want to do to help you identify those parts of speech. Okay, so first question here. We have a problem, right? Went to the gym on Thursday. We are missing something here. So we need to make a correction. And what correction do we need to make? Let's see. Nilda, I haven't picked on you yet today, Nilda. Went to the gym on Thursday. How do we correct that sentence?
B.
Insert a verb. We got a verb. We have went. It's
Subject.
Yeah, there you go. Subject, right? So there would be a number of ways we could do that. I went to the gym on Thursday. She went to the gym on Thursday. Lisa went to the gym on Thursday. But we need to have a subject, right? That's a statement. It's ending in a period, right? So it's just explicitly stating an action that somebody did. But we don't know who without that subject. So C, as in cat, we need to insert a subject there to complete that sentence. All right, and then I think we'll have our little paragraph here, so we'll have to make some changes in our drop boxes here to fix our sentences. So read along with me here, and I'll pick on you guys to make corrections for us or select the right completion for the sentences here. So have you applied for a credit card or a bank loan recently? Right? So what do we want to end that with? Jessica, how do we fix this one? B? No, you were right. You were right the first time. B. Yeah, it's a question, right? So your signal word there, have, right? Not always, but typically if you see that, you know, someone's asking a question. Have you applied for a credit card or bank loan recently? So question mark. Chances are good that information regarding your credit score factored into the result. A credit score is a number between 300 and 850 that assesses the likelihood that you will pay back a creditor. A low score is a problem. You are considered a credit risk because you are not likely to pay your debts. If your score is high, you are considered a good risk because you are likely to pay your debts. Blank, let's see here. Got a couple different choices. So either based on one's credit history, a person's credit score based on one's credit history, a credit score is based on one's credit history, or a credit score is based on one's credit history. So take a look there. Let's say, Mariama, how do we need to start that sentence to make it correct?
It's A, based on one's credit history.
So we need a little more information. So here with C, you're heading the right track. So, but what we need is a credit score is based on one's credit history. So with A, we don't have a subject. We just have based on one's credit history. We're starting with the verb there. So a credit score, though, gives us a subject, right? Credit score will be the subject then, and then is based on, right, is based on our verb, based on one's credit history. And that gives us a complete idea. And this history includes payment patterns, longevity, and current debt. Oddly enough, we'll probably talk about credit scores in social studies as well. If your score is above 700, you are likely to get good lending rates. If your score is below 600, you are likely to get high lending rates. In fact, many creditors use 620 as the determining number for credit approval. If your score is extremely low, you may be rejected for credit. One's credit score is not a stable number. And then basically, this is more about starting or what you would do for the next sentence. So let's see. Kate, what do we want to do to make a complete sentence after one's credit score is not a stable number? Oh, I got some. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat. Yes, D, right? And there's a couple other tip-offs here, right? We know we can eliminate letter C, because that's starting with a lowercase letter. So we know all our sentences start with an uppercase letter. If that number period is ending that other sentence, we know right away that we at the very least, need that capital letter. So it can go up or down. Complete sentence there, right? That's what they're looking for. Can go up or down for A, not a complete sentence. It go up or down, also not a complete sentence. So the only thing we have there, C would be correct, but the only thing that separates is that it is not a capital letter to start that sentence. So D is correct. Good job. So if you miss or make a late payment, your score will go down. It is possible to raise a low credit score by using the following tips. Pay your bills on time. Also, do not maintain high balances on your credit cards. No, yeah, Kate, I couldn't hear you. Sorry. And I see you're unmuted too. Do not open credit accounts that you don't plan to use. To have a good credit score, you must show that you are able to manage your credit. Although you need some credit cards and loans, you must manage these accounts effectively. Finally, you should know that a closed account does not disappear. All right, so throwing a couple different things at us there. Levon, you want to give this one a try?
I'm sorry, Mr. Matt, I can't read it right now.
Okay, that's fine. All right, well, let's go ahead. I'll finish this up here. So finally, you should know that a closed account does not, and Nilda says B, and yeah, it's B, Nilda. So right, we're finishing that with disappear. That is not a question, right? So we eliminate A. Finally, you should know that a closed account does not disappear. And then that account may still affect your credit score. So that makes a complete sentence for the next sentence, right? The other ones do not, right? That account basically is your subject for that next sentence. And B, all right? And that is the end of our warm-up, looking at sentence fragments. Right. And I always told this, Nilda knows, she's been around for a while. If you need to sound them out, right, and go through, if you come into this on an exam or something like that, work through them all and see what makes sense in your head, what sounds right to start with. And then you might be able to eliminate some that way. So let's hop over to Essential Ed, and we're going to be looking at basic sentence structure. Everybody should have that assigned. I actually need to pull that up over here. All right, basics. And again, I kind of hopped around a little bit, so we're not, yeah, take your time, Neil, it's fine. Because, you know, there's some overlap, like I said, between social studies. There's some overlap between the language mechanics part of language arts and the reading part of language arts. So I don't want to just like go every day and wind up having the same type of lesson. So we'll skip around a little bit to keep it kind of fresh. So basic sentences, structure, and punctuation is what we're working with today. And we got some audio. Maybe we got some audio.
Hello, this is Leonard, and I want to tell you about basic sentence structure and punctuation. What are the parts of a sentence, and how do you put them together? This lesson explains word order and sentence punctuation in statements, questions, and commands.
That's a big thing about grammar. Doesn't matter, you know, what language it's in. And of course, every language is a little bit different. But order, the way you order your words in a sentence is going to, you know, greatly change the meaning of that sentence and the idea presented in that sentence. Let's take a look.
We all make mistakes in grammar and punctuation when we write. The first step in fixing them is to understand the basics. What is a sentence? How do you construct and punctuate a sentence correctly? You'll understand a lot of this basic information intuitively. Sentences sound wrong when the basic grammar is wrong, but the better you understand the basics intellectually, the easier it'll be to find and fix more subtle errors. And of course, anyone can make a small mistake in word order, and sometimes small mistakes make a big difference. I remember one of my students had just gotten a job at a coffee shop. He was supposed to make a couple of signs to put up around the shop, and since he liked art, he wanted to do a good job and make something that looked nice, not just a flyer with a couple of words on it. So he was working on the sign in my classroom when I noticed that there was a problem. You see, the sign said on 2 lines, "Coffee Grindhouse, Wi-Fi free." I told him that it didn't mean what he thought. The word free, after a noun like Wi-Fi, means without that thing. Like hassle-free means without a hassle, and peanut-free means without peanuts. Wi-Fi free means without any Wi-Fi. If you put free first, it means without a cost. So, free peanuts means you don't have to pay for peanuts. The sign should have said free Wi-Fi. He was able to fix the sign, and he learned a little bit more about word order. Here, let's start with the basics.
Yeah, and that's just how simple it can be, and how easy you can mess up. If you got a peanut allergy, there's a big difference between free peanuts and peanut free, right? You know, things like that. And we'll talk down the road a little bit about modifiers, which is what this is getting into. You know, dangling modifiers, misplaced modifiers, and just like it says, with every language, the order you put things in is really, really important. And of course, in English, we do it different than you would in other languages. But yeah, that simple, just flipping those two words around greatly changes the meanings.
So, what is the order of words in a basic English sentence? Let's look at the most basic part of a sentence first, and then we'll add on some modifiers. A basic sentence has a subject and a verb. The subject comes first, and it's followed by the verb. Ellen drove. Some verbs have an object or a complement. That goes after the verb. Ellen drove the car.
Right. So it's just like I mentioned, Paxton, they'll say like the complete idea. But it's typically an object or a complement, something that continues on the sentence.
Simple, right? There aren't too many ways to order the words in that sentence and have it still make sense. The subject needs to go first. The verb needs to go next. And the object needs to go after the verb. Let's add some more information, though. The subject's not necessarily just one word. Adjectives that describe the subject should come directly before the subject. Phrases or clauses that make the subject more specific come after it, like this. The usually punctual Ellen, who was late that day, drove the car. The subject is a lot longer now because it includes a lot of descriptions of Ellen. Still, it comes at the beginning of the sentence, and the verb comes after it. What about other modifiers or additions to the sentence? They usually come in specific places. For example, an indirect object describes something affected by the verb, besides the direct object. If the indirect object is just a noun, it comes before the object. Ellen gave the parking attendant her keys. The parking attendant is an indirect object. You could say this a little differently using the word to. Then, the parking attendant becomes to the parking attendant, a prepositional phrase. That would go at the end of the sentence. Ellen gave her keys to the parking attendant. Other words and phrases that describe when, where, how, or why the action happened can go before the subject, at the end of the sentence, or with adverbs like usually, very, or always in the middle of the verb. On Tuesdays, Ellen will usually take the bus if she's on time. That's
So
Ellen gave
I want
her
to back
key.
up here a little bit. Let's talk about indirect objects, prepositional phrases, right? You're basically saying the same thing with those two sentences. It's maybe a little matter of choice, maybe it's a matter of style, preference. But in locating the subject, right, where is the verb? So gave in either case is the verb. So the subject is going to be before that. Ellen gave her keys to the parking attendant, or Ellen gave the parking attendant her keys. Prepositional phrases, or so prepositions, right, are words that locate something either time-wise or position or direction, right? It gives things some type of direction, either in time or as in place. Above, beyond, before, to, from, those are prepositions, and usually link those up with a prepositional phrase, right? So in this case, to the parking attendant, right? That's the direction the keys are going. I think we're right there at the end. I'll see what else he had anything else to say there.
Review of basic word order.
And see, that's the whole thing. We're getting, more and more complex ideas Very little changes though, as far as subject, verb, and as far as complete idea, if it's complement or object. Just first off, locate the subject, locate the noun. Whatever your objective is, whether it's on your GED test or something like that, or your writing. So here you just have that introductory phrase of when it happened, right? On, there's another preposition, on Tuesdays. Ellen will usually take the bus if she is on time. And there's another idea, with the modifier usually there. So you can move that word around and it will change the idea within the sentence. So if I said something like, I work out mostly in the morning, right? That's telling you the time of day that I work out, generally in the morning, not in the afternoons. But if I say I mostly work out in the morning, and put that in front of workout, that means that's what I do. That's what I spend my time on for the entirety of the morning. So just those simple, changing the position of those modifiers greatly changes what's going to happen within the sentence.
Try identifying a problem with basic word order. What's the best revision of this sentence?
All right, time to pick on you guys. Let's see. Jessica. So that sentence there, Antonio took from the fridge the can of tomatoes. That's just all mixed up. How do we correct that? What is going to be the best revision out of our choices here? C is in cat. Yep. Yeah, right. So Antonio took the can of tomatoes from the fridge. Our first choice there makes it sound like Antonio is coming from the fridge. Antonio from the fridge, like he lives there or something. Took the can of tomatoes. And then our last one, I figure most of you guys are familiar with Yoda from Star Wars, right? That's how Yoda talks, right? That's his syntax. From the fridge, the can of tomatoes Antonio took, which is also weird and awkward, and basically is directing the subject to the wrong place, right? So Antonio took the can of tomatoes from the fridge.
Great job. The phrase "from the fridge" describes where the action of the sentence happens. The most common place to put words and phrases that describe where is at the end of the sentence.
All right, and we'll keep going.
Let's talk about a couple of special kinds of sentences: questions and commands. Questions have several different forms, depending on what you're asking. But when you look at it, the forms aren't really different. It's just that some questions don't need one or more element. Let me show you. Here are 3 questions. Who gave you the jacket? What time should I talk to Jason? Did you go home? If a question has a question word, it always goes first. Question words are who, what, when, where, why, and how. They take the place of the missing information that you're asking about. So a question might start with who or no question word. In the case of what time, the word time modifies the question word what, so it goes with the question word. Next, there's the helping verb or to be verb. If there's no question word, there's always a helping verb or a to be verb. When you turn the statement "you go home" into a question, you need to add the helping verb did at the beginning. Should is a helping verb in "what time should I talk to Jason?" But in "who gave you the jacket," the question word who takes the place of a subject, so it doesn't need a helping verb. Third, there's the subject. In "who gave you the jacket," the subject is the question word who, so no other subject is needed. In "what time should I talk to Jason," the subject is I. In "did you go home," the subject is you. Next, there's the main verb. The main verbs in these questions are gave, talk, and go. Finally, all the rest of the descriptive words and phrases usually go at the end. The jacket, to Jason, and home. Sometimes a question can have a descriptive phrase at the beginning or an adverb before the main verb, just like statements. In the resources, you'll find more information about questions. Okay, let's talk about commands. Commands are a little easier. They're a kind of sentence that tells you, the listener, to do something. For example, go to the bank. Please give me that book. A command has an implied subject, you. The rest of the sentence structure is the same as a statement. You just leave out the subject. And the subject is always you. So instead of saying, you go to the bank, you just say, go to the bank. Well, that's a command. To be polite, you can add please at the beginning of a statement. Please give me that book.
You'll also hear them referred to as imperative statements, right? A command. And it's the same thing, right? Go to the bank or give me that book. It's still a command, and you could soften it and make it sound more pleasant by saying please. But they're not asking you a question, right? It's making a statement, an action that they want you to do. And of course, question marks are always asking a question. So let's take a look at our next.
Which question has an error?
Right. So it looks like we're going to need some type of helping verb here. Let's see. Mariama, which one here is the correct way to make a question? Oh, I'm sorry. Which one has an error? Which one is incorrect? Vaughn says A. So it's actually B. That's the
I'm
error.
sorry.
That's all right. Yeah. Okay. It's B. So it's missing that helping verb that they talked about, right? Why Gina go to the bank? There's not enough information there. We could say, why should Gina go to the bank? Maybe somebody else should go. Why would Gina go to the bank? Maybe she doesn't have to go. Why did Gina go to the bank, right? Also asking, what was the reason for her to leave or need to go to the bank? Not enough information in that particular question, right? We don't know exactly what they're asking. Why Gina go to the bank? There's that implies a lot. Of course, the other ones here, right? Did Gina go to the bank? Or did we send somebody else? When will Gina go to the bank? Again, there's enough information there, or who went to the bank. So it's all a matter of making sure that you have, if necessary, in this case, right? We need that helping verb there to finish that idea. It makes me think of I knew this girl in grad school, and back in the day before most of us had smartphones, and everybody had like flip phones and everything, and you had to text, and the letters on the phone matched up with your like 3 letters. So you had like if you wanted to see, you hit your number 1, you went 1, 2, 3, and you got to see. And it took forever to text people that way. And her phone, for some reason, she had an issue where she wound up typing, too fast or something, and she wound up making a lot of her statements questions. Instead of ending her text in a period, she would put a question on there. So if you're in a conversation with her, it always sounded like she was really uncertain. She would say something about, I'm on your front porch. Like she was just like unsure, right? And so, you got to be careful about, as far as punctuation goes, make sure that you're using the right thing. So it's, it's just, and, of course, this is all, again, kind of related to context, right? In these instances, this is when we are writing and you don't have, any, or the reader doesn't have all the context. And I mentioned this, Nilda knows I talk about this, in conversational language, we leave out a lot, right? And we get into sort of bad habits when we do that. And when it comes time to write, we have to remember that if we're writing something formally, the people that's going to be reading that, don't always know the context. They don't know that missing information. So we have to make sure that we're including everything. All right, we're going on here.
Let's talk about one more part of building a basic sentence, the punctuation at the end. Every sentence ends in one of three basic punctuation marks: a period, a question mark, or an exclamation point. Most sentences end in a period. It just marks the end of a sentence. Abraham washed the dishes. Commands usually end in periods, just like statements do. Please wash the dishes. Questions end in a question mark. The question mark shows that the sentence is a question. Will you wash the dishes? Sometimes it's tempting to use a question mark on a statement that talks about asking a question. These sentences are sometimes called indirect questions. They might start out with, I wonder if, or I wonder whether, or he asked if. Here's an example. John asked if Karen would please wash the dishes. But this sentence isn't a question. It doesn't start with a question word or a helping verb. It should have a period. John asked if Karen would please wash the dishes. An exclamation point is used to show emotion or urgency, like this. Erica shouted, "There's a fire in the kitchen!" You won't usually use exclamation points at all in formal writing. In informal writing, use exclamation points sparingly.
Right. It's just like writing, writing in all caps, right? If it's on like in a text or on a social media post or something like that, that implies that you're shouting at somebody. So if you overuse exclamation points, even if it's like fictional writing or something, nobody's like screaming and all excited all the time, right? So you want to use those sparingly. And then of course, again, like question marks, if it's in a wrong place, it makes you just sound uncertain. Right? If I put a question mark in, it's like I'm going to get ice cream, right? It always sounds like you're uncertain about your actions. So those three, right, are basically the only thing you're ever going to see at the end of a sentence in the English language, and the majority of which, unless you're asking a question, is going to be the period. And again, it's separating your sentences into meaningful units. That makes a complete one. You start with a capital letter, you end with either exclamation point, question mark, or period to end that idea. All right, so let's see what we have now.
Which sentence has an error in punctuation?
Okay, here we go. Let's see. Nilda, I'm gonna go back to you. All right, which sentence here are we looking at an error in punctuation?
I think A.
Nope, because that is like an imperative or command statement. Go get the file from the storage room. Give you another shot here.
C.
So it's D actually, and you're intuitively you think, well, I'm wondering if Mr. Inez has finished the report. That sounds like you're questioning something, right? But the way that is formulated, right? The way we put that together, you're actually making a statement, not asking a question. So the correct answer there, and just to review the other ones here, Miss Jackson asked if the conference room was free, right? That also is describing the action that Miss Jackson took, right? She's asked somebody. That's not a question. Will the auditors be arriving tomorrow? That starts with will. So that gives you a signal there that you're asking a question, right? That replaces the subject, right? Will the auditors be arriving tomorrow? But that last one, right? Not necessarily asking a question. And like I said, it's kind of intuitive, intuitively you're thinking, if I'm wondering about something, right, I'm questioning something, but that's actually the action, right? Because what you have there is I to start the sentence, right? That is your subject. Wonder is your verb. And then the complement there is, right, if Mr. Inez has finished the report. Let's see, Kate, you got a question? I don't know if you're talking, I can't hear you. I don't. If you got, could you put in the chat if you're. Well, I think she is unmuted, Nilda. I can't hear you though. Can you type it? Could be your headphones too. If you're sometimes those will affect your microphone. Oh yeah, good question. So if you're abbreviating Mr., Miss, like titles like that, yeah, that's another time that you will use the period, right? So doctor, if you shorten that to like DR, right? Mr., if you're shortening that to MR, and that's always, you know, you have your capital M and then lowercase r period. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So there is other instances where we use a period. We don't always call it a period in those situations, but yeah, good call. In abbreviating, you will use them, and there's other words too. So typically it's with what do you call it? Titles, right? Mr., Mrs., Miss, doctor. If somebody uses their initials for their name instead of their whole name, who's that dude? Who's the guy running for Senate? JD Vance, right? So J period D period Vance, right? That's how you'd shorten them. So yeah, that's the airtime. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So there is times you would use particularly a period in other instances besides at the end of a sentence. Question marks, exclamation points, nah, that would be the exception there. But periods we do. We're going to have more on punctuation as well. We'll get into, you know, apostrophes, commas, you know, comma usage, and you know, some of those other funkier ones that you don't and should not use very often, but you will encounter, and it might be the only time that, you know, there's going to be specific situations where, you know, something like that will be useful. All right, yeah, good call. So let's see here.
Now it's time to show that you've learned this concept. Try some practice problems to demonstrate your understanding. There are 8 questions total, but first, I'll show you 3 questions.
All right,
If you
all
can
right. We
review
know
to
the deal
reinforce
here.
your
We don't
learning.
need to listen to Leonard. So once again, if you guys want to take about 10, 15 minutes, we'll go ahead and say 10 to go ahead and start your lesson. And then we'll follow up here at the end of class and wrap things up for the day. All right, let's go ahead and take about 10 minutes here. I'm going to pause my recording.